Hello, friends. Welcome back. This is Ellen. I'm Ellen. I am the host of the Catholics Against Militarism podcast. This is episode whatever episode this is, that's the one it is. Welcome back. It's so good to be here with you. My hair is a mess. I'm just winging it today. I am winging it. I am very excited to announce a couple of new classes at my company, Teach to the Text. I'm going through a big America phase. I don't know about you, but I am asking questions about this country, and maybe you are too. And I have found a couple of good teachers to learn from, and I want to give you the opportunity to learn from them too. So there's a couple of classes coming up that I can't wait to tell you about. So the first one is a class with E. Michael Jones on his new book, Walking with a Bible and a Gun. Now, you might say, why are you doing a class with him? Well, listen to the first line in his book. In his classic book on the meaning of the frontier, Frederick Jackson Turner cited a statute from Virginia which described an American as a warlike Christian man. Is that what an American is? A warlike Christian man. I think that this, of all the books that Dr. Jones has written, I think this one is perfect for the Catholics Against Militarism YouTube channel. Well, not the channel, but it's perfect for maybe fans of the channel. So if you'd like to join that class, it starts on September 9th. It's a little more expensive than the last one. You can click the link below, read all about it. Would love to have you join us. I think we're meeting, I don't remember the details. You can read it on the page. It's like 10, 12, 14 weeks, something like that, maybe 10 or 12 weeks. We're going to meet every week with Dr. Jones in a live class, and we're going to discuss different, we're going to go through it's like a book club, but with the author. And so I'm really looking forward to reading this. I started reading it over the weekend, and I'm into it. I like it. I'm seeing things that are missing, though. I'm seeing things that are missing, but maybe I'm only on the 4th chapter, so maybe we'll get to that. One of the reasons that I love interviewing E. Michael Jones, one of the reasons I'm interested in his work, is because of something I learned from him many years ago now, which was this theory of the triple melting pot. And the idea that after like 1 or 2 generations, you're no longer an African or a Swede or a Russian or a Nigerian or an Irishman. In America, after a couple generations, you're either a Catholic, a Protestant, or a Jew. That's a theory a sociological theory about the United States. And I always thought that was super interesting, super illuminating. And with my experience, having lived all over the country in different places, it really resonates with me. It really resonates with me. Sometimes I feel like I have more in common with a Catholic from the Philippines than I do with a Protestant from Arkansas. I don't know. I just think that there's something to it. I think there's something to it. So this book is all about American identity. And today on the podcast, I'm going to read you the introduction to the book. Like I said, this class is a little more expensive than the last one I did with Dr. Jones, and it does not include the book. But this book, usually his books are like $50. This one's, I think, like $25. And if you think it's a little on the pricier side, think of it this way. If you've never donated to the Catholics Against Militarism podcast, this is a good way to support me and my work, my education, my teaching, the podcast itself. The more support I can get from listeners, the more time I can actually have to do the podcast, because I do have to try to make a living, and I am a solopreneur right now with my own business, launching, mostly working with homeschooled kids, but I do occasionally have classes for adults. And so if you've never donated but you appreciate the content, even if it's a little on the pricier side, if you're interested, I encourage you to hop on board and join us for this fall. We're going to be reading this together, and think of it as a donation, a way of supporting the podcast. Another thing before I get around to reading the introduction of this book, which is really good, I wanted to tell you about another class that's along the same lines as this one that I'm going to be that's going to be at Teach to the Text, my company. Starting in January. Now, this person has nothing to do with E. Michael Jones. I know I have to say that up front because everybody who is associated with Dr. Jones has to be punished. They have to be punished for being like unclean or whatever. I don't know, but so I feel like I have to say these two teachers have nothing to do with each other. They don't even know each other, I don't think. But there's another teacher who's coming on board at my company who's creating an amazing class, a 14-week history class for homeschoolers that I personally am excited to take. And I think it would be an amazing follow-up to the course with Dr. Jones. That one will start in, well, I don't know yet if the teacher is going to do a live class. I think I can convince him to do an evening class for adults. I'm definitely wanting to take it. But that class is going to be called America, Kingdom of Empire. Hold on. No, America, Course of Empire, Kingdom of Saints. And so what I'm noticing, I'm only 4 chapters in this book, it's very much about Protestants and kind of the Protestant history of our country and Dr. Jones's views on that, which he does not hold back on at all. But that class is going to be all about seeing American history through the lives of American saints. I'm so excited to offer this class to, high school homeschoolers, but also I think it's going to be a class that a lot of adults will want to take as well. I don't know about you, but the American history that I learned in school was entirely, I never saw anyone even attempting to explain how Catholicism fit into Americanism and all of that. And I really didn't even know the names of American saints until recently. Really, I never learned about it. So it's going to be really interesting because the teacher is going to be a man named Claudio Salvucci. He is a very prolific writer. He actually wrote his own follow-up to the Aeneid. And he's just, he's an incredible scholar, and he's actually gathering primary sources for this book. And so we're going to get to read primary sources from the saints' lives and talk about, what particular challenges was being experienced in the country during that era, and then how did people in a state of grace rise to meet those challenges. So that's going to be really great. So click the links in the description below. You can sign up for the class with Dr. Jones that starts in September. You can sign up to be notified via email when the class launches, when Claudio Salvucci's class launches. It'll definitely be a self-paced course that you can take on your own. We're also going to try to market it to co-ops, high school co-ops who want to study it together. And then as well, I'm trying to get him to teach a live class so I can keep you in the loop. But sign up below for that so I can keep you informed. And yeah, like I said, jump in this class with me with E. Michael Jones. It's going to be interesting. Let me read you the introduction so you can get a taste for what this book is all about. All right. He says, it starts, Sue, you're an American. Walt, what does that mean? Sue, Clint Eastwood, Gran Torino. All right, so that's how it starts, and I assume he's going to come back and explain that later. Not too long ago, I received an email from a subscriber to Culture Wars who claimed that he could trace his family's roots in this country back to 1683. That man became a Catholic because of reading my books and listening to my podcasts. Yay! Go Dr. Jones! His new Catholic identity, however, created an unexpected problem. He no longer knew what it meant to be an American. This man is not alone. According to Samuel Huntington, America has been going through an identity crisis. Under President Clinton, quote, the ideologies of multiculturalism and diversity eroded the legitimacy of the remaining central elements of American identity, the cultural core and the American creed, unquote. The rise of identity politics and critical race theory began in the 1990s when, quote, Americans engaged in intense debates over immigration and assimilation, multiculturalism and diversity, race relations and affirmative action, religion in the public sphere, bilingual education, school and college curricula, school prayer and abortion, the meaning of citizenship and nationality, foreign involvement in American elections, the extraterritorial application of American law, and the increasing political role of diasporas here and abroad. Underlying all these issues is the question of national identity. Virtually any position on any one of these issues implies certain assumptions about that identity, unquote. The Clintons made it clear that to be a true American, one had to be a member of one of the special interest groups which constituted the Democratic Party. In doing this, the Clintons launched their own, quote, Great Revolution, unquote, which based itself on the Civil Rights Revolution, while nullifying the American Revolution of 1776 as their way of proving, quote, that we literally can live without having a dominant European culture, unquote. That identity shift began during the last year of the Reagan administration. On January 15, 1987, Jesse Jackson, scion of the Civil Rights Movement, turned that premise into a slogan when he marched down Palm Drive, Stanford Avenue's grand entrance, chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go." During the 1990s, multiculturalists fought a winning battle over the curriculum at the university, which eventually routed the idea that there was one coherent understanding of what it meant to be an American. The high point of American identity found expression in 1961, when Robert Frost invoked the heroic deeds of America's founding at President John F. Kennedy's inauguration. God's approval of America's founding, Frost continued, introduced a new order of the ages into human history, which was about to enter a golden age of poetry and power. In spite of the crimes committed in America's name, I think Frost said this, our venture in revolution and outlawry has justified itself in freedom's story, right down to now in glory upon glory. That golden age came to an abrupt end less than 3 years later, when John F. Kennedy was murdered in a coup d'etat which has had tragic consequences to this day. One of the tragic consequences of the Kennedy assassination was loss of American identity. 32 years later, Maya Angelou, America's new poet laureate, denounced the same America that Robert Frost had praised in 1961 as now, quote, wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness, unquote, and a threat to the ethnic, racial, and religious identities of those who had suffered as a result of America's, quote, armed struggles for profit and its, quote, bloody sear of, quote, cynicism. Within 30 years, the political pendulum had swung from chauvinism to collective self-abasement, and any understanding that Americans shared a common identity got lost in the process. Samuel Huntington wrote Who Are We? In the wake of the attack on the World Trade Center in Manhattan on September 11, 2001, expecting a revitalization and reaffirmation of American identity. But the short-lived wave of patriotism, which was orchestrated in the wake of 9/11, failed to stem the erosion of American identity, which has accelerated dramatically over the quarter century since the publication of Who Are We? Over the last quarter century, in fact, the exact opposite of what Huntington predicted has happened, and we have witnessed a deliberate attempt to destroy what is left of national identity through the weaponization of race and gender. The George Floyd riots and the emergence of Black Lives Matter epitomize the rise of identity politics and the racial balkanization of America. During those riots, blacks could engage in mayhem with impunity. If the riots in the wake of George Floyd showed that groups like Black Lives Matter had privileges that put them above the law, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in August 2017 showed that anyone who identified as white had lost the right to free speech and the right to assemble, both of which were guaranteed by the Constitution. The white organizers of that rally were blamed for the violence which the local police orchestrated in collaboration with Antifa. They were then subjected to lawsuits orchestrated by Roberta Kaplan, a self-described chubby lesbian kike. That's in quotes, and those are her words, not mine. With Jewish privilege, allowing her to weaponize the American legal system against those who proclaim themselves loyal Americans. The unexpected sequel to the George Floyd riots took place in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021, when the FBI, the media, and the Democrat-controlled Congress turned a protest by patriotic Americans who thought that the Constitution guaranteed their right to free speech and assembly into an insurrection which landed many of them in prison. During the 20 years period following the 9/11 attacks, a dramatic shift had taken place in the American political landscape. Instead of reaffirming American identity in a time of crisis, feminist politicians like Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer and her Jewish lesbian Attorney General Dana Nessel portrayed the people they were elected to represent as enemies of the state and then went on to collaborate with the FBI by orchestrating entrapment schemes that would land naive believers in the American system in prison. American identity had not only not been affirmed, it had been weaponized against the very people who most believed in it. Being a patriotic American had become a criminal offense. Obviously, E. Michael Jones has his own viewpoints here and his definition of what it means to be a patriotic American. You can disagree with that. I'm simply reading the introduction. I think it's interesting. Being a patriotic American had become a criminal offense. As a result, the issue which Huntington posed in the wake of the 9/11 attacks led not to a surge of patriotism and unity, but rather to a series of questions which remain unanswered. Quote, we Americans face a substantive problem of national identity epitomized by the subject of this sentence. Are we a we, one people or several? If we are a we, what distinguishes us from thems who are not us? Race, religion, ethnicity, values, culture, wealth, politics, or what? Is the United States, as some have argued, a universal nation based on values common to all humanity and in principle embracing all peoples? Or are we a Western nation with our identity defined by our European heritage and institutions? Or are we unique with a distinctive civilization of our own, as the proponents of American exceptionalism have argued throughout our history? Are we basically a political community whose identity exists only in a social contract embodied in the Declaration of Independence and other founding documents? Are we multicultural, bicultural, or unicultural, a mosaic or a melting pot? Do we have any meaningful identity as a nation that transcends our subnational ethnic, religious, racial identities? These questions remain for Americans in their post-September 11th era. They are in part rhetorical questions, but they are also questions that have profound implications for American society and American policy at home and abroad. Huntington resolved those questions as quickly as he raised them that was the end of the quote. Huntington resolved those questions as quickly as he raised them by declaring in one bold stroke that, in spite of the perturbations caused by the rise of multiculturalism and identity politics, America remains an Anglo-Protestant country. Quote, the principal theme of this book is the continuing centrality of Anglo-Protestant culture to American national identity, unquote. America is, quote, the child of the Reformation, unquote. By the Reformation, Huntington means specifically, quote, the English Puritan Revolution, unquote, which he describes as, quote, the single most important formative event of American political history, unquote. More specifically, the iteration of the Reformation, which the Puritans founded on Massachusetts Bay, involves the English language, the English language, Christianity, religious commitment, English concepts of the rule of law, the responsibility of rulers and the rights of individuals, and dissenting Protestant values of individualism, the work ethic, and the belief that humans have the ability and the duty to try to create a heaven on earth, a city on a hill. Historically, millions of immigrants were attracted to America because of this culture and the economic opportunities it helped to make possible. Unquote. This Anglo-Protestant culture, we're back to Jones's words now. This Anglo-Protestant culture has been central to American identity for 3 centuries, and Huntington sees no reason why it should not serve as the template for another 3 centuries, as long as Americans recommit themselves to the Anglo-Protestant culture, traditions, and values that for 3.5 centuries have been embraced by Americans of all races, ethnicities, and religions, and that have been the source of their liberty, unity, power, prosperity, and moral leadership as a force for good in the world, unquote. That's what Huntington thinks. We're back to Jones here. If America is Anglo-Protestant, then its antithesis is Hispano-Catholic. Shortly after writing Who Are We?, Huntington wrote The Hispanic Challenge, a book, at a time when, quote, this is Huntington again, a massive Hispanic influence raised questions concerning America's linguistic and cultural unity. Corporate executives, professionals, and information-age technocrats espoused cosmopolitan over national identities. The teaching of national history gave way to the teaching of ethnic and racial histories. The celebration of diversity replaced emphasis on what Americans had in common. The national unity and sense of national identity created by work and war in the 18th and 19th centuries and consolidated in the world wars of the 20th century seemed to be eroding. By 2000, America was, in many respects, less a nation than it had been for a century. The stars and stripes were at half-mast, and other flags flew higher on the flagpole of American identities, unquote. I remember there was a time several years ago where I started to realize that it seemed like 50% of the time when I drove by a bank or something, the flag was at half-mast. It was like we were in this like permanent state of like crisis and grief for one thing or another. And that seemed really weird to me. All right, so that's the end of the quote. Now we're back to Dr. Jones's words. The inescapable corollary to Huntington's claim that America is Anglo-Protestant is that Catholics pose a threat to American identity. The main issue, however, is not that Huntington perceives Catholics as the enemy. The main issue is that he doesn't understand Protestantism. Like most Whig historians, he gets his definition of Protestantism from Weber. Huntington calls Weber's Protestant work ethic the religion of work, which misses the point. Like the melting pot, the Protestant work ethic is a myth, which obscures the fact that by the 20th century, assimilation took place according to religion, which meant that an immigrant became an American by becoming first not an Anglo-Protestant, but rather a Protestant, a Catholic, or a Jew. The sociological theory explaining that transformation is known as the triple melting pot, which explains not only the real matrix of assimilation, but also the conflict between those groups, which destroyed any coherent understanding of American identity. That sentence right there, I underlined it and put a star. I'm like, that's it right there. That is it. What is the identity when these three groups are so different? And yet we all live here. And so what is it that we have in common, if anything? And that's what I'm looking forward to hearing, if there's an answer to that question that Dr. Jones has in this book. I mean, yeah, of course, like you want to say like freedom or the Constitution, but does anybody pay attention to the Constitution anymore? I don't know. And besides, I think they don't even learn like civics in school anymore. So few students are actually learning about civics, and when they teach American history, they really are teaching it in terms of this like race, gender, class paradigm. And it's kind of, it's like that's the only paradigm now. So if anything, like I think Dr. Jones' work is interesting. Is like he's introducing a new paradigm to look at things through. And I think the more of those that we have, the better. The more of a well-rounded view we can get of history and our own country and our understanding. The Weber thesis has been an integral part of that obfuscation because Protestant identity, especially one based on Puritanism, has always been crypto-Jewish. In his 1907 book, Jews and Modern Capitalism, Werner Sombart points out that everything Weber said about Puritans was a fortiori true of Jews. If Sombart's earlier book on capitalism caused Weber to write his articles on the Puritan spirit, those articles led Sombart to write his book on the Jews and modern capitalism. In fact, Sombart writes, Max Weber's researches are responsible for this book. I have already mentioned that Max Weber's study of the importance of Puritanism for the capitalistic system was the impetus that sent me to consider the importance of the Jew, especially as I felt that the dominating ideas of Puritanism, which were so powerful in capitalism, were more perfectly developed in Judaism and were also of a much earlier date. Unquote. Interesting. Never thought of that before. Never thought of capitalism as being a specifically Protestant thing, and never thought that it had any connection with Judaism. So these are new connections to me, new ideas. Having read Weber's thesis, Sombart wonders whether, quote, whether all that Weber ascribes to Puritanism might not with equal justice be referred to Judaism, and probably in a greater degree. Nay, it might well be suggested that that which is called Puritanism is really Judaism, unquote. Okay, that seems to be quite a stretch, but I think I know where he's going with this because I read it last night. Sorry, okay. According to Sombart, Puritanism is nothing more than an aberrant form of Judaism because both are based on, quote, the preponderance of religious interests, the idea of divine rewards and punishments, asceticism within the world, the close relationship between religion and business, the arithmetical conception of sin, and above all, the rationalization of life, unquote. No matter how often, back to Jones's words here, no matter how often establishment thinkers like Huntington invoke Weber's thesis on the Protestant work ethic, it has become an ahistorical fantasy which distracts from a fundamental fact of Protestantism. Work had nothing to do with the Reformation. which began as a looting operation which despoiled the monasteries of 900 years of accumulated labor. The Reformation was based on theft of church property. The Reformation sought to consolidate those ill-gotten gains through theological contortions of the sort Tawney characterized accurately when he wrote that, quote, "The upstart aristocracy of the future had their teeth in the carcass, and having tasted blood, they were not to be whipped off by a sermon," unquote. Weber and Huntington misunderstood the theological trajectory of Protestantism, which was basically a theological justification of looting after the fact. A more recent version of the same misunderstanding of Protestantism can be found in La Défaite de l'Occident, a book in which Emmanuel Todd claims that the current collapse of the American empire has been caused by the evaporation of Protestantism, which he describes as its hidden grammar. America is now facing defeat in the Ukraine because of the complete disappearance of the Christian foundation of its culture. Quote, un phénoménon historique crucial qui... Oh man, I took French in high school and college, and I'm not even going to try to read that. We're going to keep going. Protestantism, which, quote, to a large extent has been the economic strength of the West, is dead, unquote. The United States and England have been caught up in, quote, centripetal narcissistic then nihilistic drift, unquote, which has led both to the present empire and its predecessor to the, quote, zero state, which he defines as a nation state which is, quote, no longer structured by its original values, unquote, because the Protestant work ethic and the feeling of responsibility which previously animated its population have evaporated. Trump and Biden epitomize the apotheosis of the zero state because Washington's decisions in both administrations are no longer moral or rational. The zero state, when he says no longer moral or rational, I'm like, when were they ever? When was the United States federal government's actions ever moral or rational? Maybe we can discuss that in the class. That's a question I'll have for Dr. Jones. The zero state was preceded by the zombie state, which retained the form of religion, emptied of its content. Todd sees Benjamin Franklin as the classic example of a zombie Protestant who no longer practices his religion, but retains its ethics, attached to the values of honesty, work, seriousness, and always aware that man only has a limited amount of time. Zombie Protestant society emerged in Europe when Germany and Great Britain created a world, quote, in which religious practice withers, but where the social values of religion persist, as well as the rites of passage prescribed by the various churches. Neither baptism nor marriage nor burial are called into question, but as a sign that the West no longer respects the biblical commandment to grow and multiply, fertility is falling in the middle classes. Deprived of its supervision, the Protestant work ethic in Britain devolved into pure nationalism. Literacy is a fundamental Protestant value because sola scriptura requires the masses to be literate in order to have access to the scriptures, which makes every man his own priest, thus promoting democracy and egalitarianism, unquote. Like Samuel Huntington, Todd derives his understanding of Protestantism from Max Weber's famous book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. In his attempt to answer the question, Todd, I'm not going to, there's no translation. I don't know. There's a question in French. Dr. Jones, you need to include the English translations for dummies like me. Again, I took 6 years of French and I can't read those 4 words. Public education. No, I'm just kidding. My school was great. I just wasn't paying attention. I had other things on my mind. Todd specifically identifies himself as a pupil of Weber. Todd is, quote, more French. All right. Conspicuous by its absence from Todd's list of foundational revolutions, which created the Anglo-American Empire, was the revolutionary decade of the 1640s in England, which preceded the Glorious Revolution by 40 years. Todd, for some reason, omitted the prime example of the revolutionary spirit in both England and New England, namely the Puritans, who are doubly significant because of their overt and obvious link to the Jewish revolutionary spirit. The Jewish revolutionary spirit is a whole separate book that Dr. Jones wrote, where he has this thesis that Jews are revolutionaries and that they have been behind most of the revolutionary movements in history, and that this stems from their rejection of what he calls logos. That's his thesis. It's a pretty fascinating book. I haven't actually read it, but I've read parts of it. So that's what he's referring to here. He says that the Puritans have an overt and obvious link to the Jewish revolutionary spirit. And again, I just want to point out that's a spirit that has nothing to do with somebody's genetics or biology. It's a spirit in which it's a revolutionary spirit. Okay, so you can live in that spirit even if you're not Jewish. And just because you're Jewish doesn't mean that you live in that spirit. Yeah, just to clarify that. But also because one of the most famous Puritans was John Milton, the man who wrote the Protestant epic Paradise Lost, which portrayed Satan as the patron saint of Protestantism. Both William Blake and Percy Bysshe Shelley believed that Satan was the hero of Paradise Lost. They both critiqued Milton's Satan by finding several imperfections in Paradise Lost. Both tried to surpass Milton by creating their own perfect version of Milton's Satan. Shelley goes a step beyond Blake when designing his Satan by producing a new tragic hero that does not have a hamartia. Sorry, I'm bad at pronunciation. End quote. Protestantism may be the hidden grammar of the American empire, but Satanism is the hidden grammar of Protestantism. Dang, Dr. Jones, don't sugarcoat it. Don't hold back. Let me read that again. Protestantism may be the hidden grammar of the American empire, but Satanism is the hidden grammar of Protestantism. All right, so I'll let you do the calculation there. What would Dr. Jones say is the hidden grammar of Americanism or the American empire? Herman Melville understood this, as did virtually every other writer of the American Renaissance, the literary movement in the mid-19th century, which gave birth to American identity. In Moby Dick, First Mate Starbuck rebuked Captain Ahab for the madness involved in taking vengeance on a dumb brute that simply smote thee from blindest instinct, by describing it as blasphemy. Ahab, who seems predestined for destruction at his own hand, doubles down, like a good Emersonian, and says, "Talk not to me of blasphemy, man! I'd strike the sun if it insulted me." As they are getting ready to sail on the ship, Ishmael and Queequeg are confronted by a strange figure who, quote, leveled his massive forefinger at the vessel in question, and asked them, "Shipmates, have ye shipped in that ship?" The name of the ragged old sailor is Elijah. When Ishmael admits that he and Queequeg have signed a contract binding them to sail on a whaling expedition with Captain Ahab, Elijah asks, "Anything there about your souls?" It's a question Americans have been asking about the ship of state for a long time. Anything there about your souls? The question became especially relevant when Stockton Rush's aptly named submarine, the Titan, imploded with all hands on board near the wreck of the Titanic, which each passenger paid $250,000 to view. Rush has been described as a cowboy who cut too many corners, but he is clearly an avatar of Captain Ahab. Docile to the conventional narrative, Ishmael thinks that Ahab is a good whale hunter and a good captain to his crew, but the stranger Elijah knows that he is more than that. Ishmael and Queequeg have made a pact with the devil, but like most Americans, they don't understand how. After signing the contract, everything is all fixed and arranged in a way that mirrored covenant theology and Calvinist predestination. Like his namesake, Elijah is a prophet without honor in his native place. The Pequod is the ship of state. Ahab is the psychopath who sits at the helm as it sails to its doom. Stockton Rush is Captain Ahab. All CEOs are psychopaths and narcissists. Sorry. All CEOs are psychopaths and narcissists. Wait, I'm a CEO. Hopefully you have to make a certain amount of revenue every year before you become a psychopath and a narcissist. I think I'm pretty safe if that's the case. All right, sorry, I got distracted thinking about myself. All CEOs are psychopaths and narcissists, and before you raise any objections, it is always the exception which proves the rule. A psychopath is now captain of the ship of state, which is America, which is the world's fourth great religion, as Yale professor David Gellertner has pointed out. Interesting. America, the world's fourth great religion. But like Immanuel Todd, David Gellertner did not point out that Satanism is the hidden grammar of the religion known as America. America was a Protestant colony, and so it should come as no surprise that Satanism became the hidden grammar of the English Reformation before it could be exported to America. Shakespeare pointed this out in Ulysses' speech in Troilus and Cressida when he described the aftermath of the Reformation in its inexorable trajectory. Take but degree away untune that string, and hark what discord follows. Each thing meets in mere oppugnancy. The bounded waters should lift their bosoms higher than the shores, and make a sop of all this solid globe. Strength should be the lord of imbecility, and the rude son should strike his father dead. Force should be right, or rather right and wrong, between whose endless jar justice resided. Should loose their names, and so should justice too. Should lose their names, and so should justice too. Then everything includes itself in power, power into will, will into appetite, and appetite a universal wolf, so doubly seconded with will and power, must make perforce an universal prey, and last eat up himself. Shakespeare's play is set in ancient Greece, but he is really talking about the situation in Elizabethan England in the aftermath of the Reformation, when the crown had lost all legitimacy, but retained its hold on power by transforming Catholic England into the world's first police state. Shakespeare's genius lay in his ability to describe accurately, if poetically, the novel form of government which the Reformation introduced to England. Todd calls it nihilism, which is closely related to Satanism, because nature abhors a vacuum. The void created by the disappearance of Protestantism was filled by nihilism, which Todd defines as an amoralism stemming from an absence of values, unquote. Nihilism, he tells us, quote, denies reality and truth. It is a cult of lies, unquote. Nihilism leads to narcissism, both of which are based on a denial of reality that has become pandemic in societies which claim that, quote, a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man, unquote. An affirmation which Todd describes as false and, quote, close to the theoretical heart of Western nihilism, unquote. Because, quote, right and wrong have lost their names, unquote. A man can become a woman if the powerful decree it possible. That has political ramifications because it also means that a nuclear treaty with Iran under Obama can transform overnight into an aggravated sanctions regime under Trump. I have lots of notes in my book there, but I'm going to have to save those questions for class. Todd indicates obliquely that Satanism is the hidden grammar of the zero state when he claims that a satanic ritual, une sorte de rituel économique philosophico-satanique, served as the demarcation point between the era of the WASP elite and the moment it was succeeded by the Synagogue of Satan as America's ruling class. I need to ask in class, like, is he talking about a literal satanic ritual that served as the demarcation point? Blinded by the superficial categories he has appropriated from Max Weber, Todd fails to see not only that the hidden grammar of Protestantism is satanic, but more importantly, that America became the great Satan when the Jews took over its culture. Todd, sorry, it's just so blunt. But, you know, you've heard that the Muslims call America the great Satan, and I remember back in the days of like 9/11, I was like, oh, how could they say that about us? We're so good. We're so great. How could they say that about us? And then as the next 20 years went on, I was like, oh my God, we are. Oh my gosh, sorry. don't mean to take the Lord's name in vain, but I'm like, we kind of are. Like, look at our movies, look at the filth of our culture, look at the degradation of just, like, we kind of are. And I'm like, so much of what this country puts out there into the world is disgusting. It's disgusting. And as time has gone on, I've just become more and more disgusted with our culture. And I'm like, there's nothing. It does seem like the great Satan to me sometimes. Not that Americans, like, specifically are any worse than any other people, but it's our power to, like, export our culture all over the world. And I'm like, I don't think that do I agree with the Muslims on this? Like, I kind of hate our American culture too at this point. But okay, yeah, so we'll keep going. Todd insists that the disappearance of Protestantism is, quote, the decisive explanatory key, unquote, to understanding, quote, the current global turbulence, unquote, without telling us who succeeded the WASPs as America's new ruling class. Todd claims that religious extinction led to the disappearance of social morality and collective feeling, to a process of centrifugal geographic expansion combining with the disintegration of the original heart of the system, unquote, as if it were an impersonal act of nature without human actors at the helm. And I think I kind of get what he's saying here. It's like, if the WASPs are no longer in power and Protestantism is dying or dead, then who came to power in their wake? Like, it certainly wasn't Catholics. I certainly don't look around at this country and say, oh, we live in a Catholic country. Like, not at all. It's like you have to crawl into a small corner of your little parish or something, or your little Catholic school to, like, find that culture. It's not just out there. And the culture that's just out there is definitely not Catholic. And I would say not Christian. Satanism has been the trajectory of the Anglo-American Empire ever since Satan gave his famous speech at the beginning of Paradise Lost. When Percy Bysshe Shelley wanted to light the fire of rebellion in Ireland, he could find no better phrase than the one Satan used to rouse the demons in hell. Awake, arise, or be forever fallen. Milton's heroic Satanism first becomes apparent at the beginning of the speech, when Satan, who has been expelled from heaven, wakes up in the sea of flame, which is now not only his eternal home, but his kingdom as well. Satan begins by saying farewell to heaven, but soon gets to the point. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors! Hail, infernal world, and thou profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor. One who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he, whom thunder hath made greater. Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Here at least, the Puritans said when they arrived in America, we may reign secure. After the Puritan dictator Oliver Cromwell died in 1660, a wave of revulsion at the excesses of Puritanism swept through England, best symbolized by the mob which exhumed Cromwell's body and hanged it. Cromwell's head popped off during this act of desecration, and its whereabouts remain unknown to this day, but his revolutionary spirit had departed from England while his head was still on his shoulders, migrating across the Atlantic to Massachusetts, where it became the spiritus movens behind the American Revolution a century later. The Methodist divine William Fletcher understood this best. In a letter denouncing the seditious sophism which Reverend Richard Price, the nonconformist supporter of both the American and French revolutions, espoused in his sermons, Fletcher compared Price to Satan with specific reference to Milton's epic. Price's wicked speech could have been made by Satan to the son, quote, Satan to the Son of God. Okay, Satan to this, and this is a quote. Satan to the Son of God. What is this from? From Fletcher, I think. Satan to the Son of God, when according to Milton's fancy, they encountered each other in the heavenly plains. I meet thee in the field to defend my freedom and assert the liberty of these heavenly legions. Before I pierce thy side with my spear, let me pierce thy conscience with my arguments. In a free state in heaven, where liberty is perfect, everyone is his own legislator. To be free is to be guided by one's own will, and to be guided by the will of another is the character of servitude. They call the Messiah the Prince, but for as much as thou sayest, I do nothing of myself. And art not ashamed to add, Father, not my will, but thine be done, and to teach the mean spirits who follow thee to pray, thy will be done in heaven and on earth. It is plain that thou restrainest the power of self-government and introduced slavery. End quote. Satanic liberty, this is Jones writing, satanic liberty is another word for slavery. Fletcher echoes Satan's speech directly when he ascribes to Price and other supporters of the American Revolution the notion that, quote, self-government and supremacy in hell are preferable to servile obedience and subordinate grandeur in heaven, unquote. Fletcher concludes his argument by claiming that, quote, that the, quote, speech of the patriotic seraph, unquote, otherwise known as Satan, quote, is formed upon the same principles laid down in Dr. Price's pamphlet, unquote. It is that satanic spirit which, quote, which deluges America and threatens to overthrow Great Britain itself, unquote. In 1776, Thomas Paine quoted Milton's Satan in Common Sense, the pamphlet he wrote urging the colonies to rebel against the mother country, England. Reconciliation, Paine told the colonists, is now a fallacious dream. Nature hath deserted the connection, and art cannot supply her place. For as Milton wisely expresses, never can true reconcilement grow where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep, unquote. In order not to offend the religious sensibilities of his American audience, Paine did not cite the rest of Satan's speech, which concludes by carrying the satanic logic of rebellion to its inevitable conclusion. So farewell hope, and with hope farewell fear, farewell remorse. All good to me is lost. Evil, be thou my good. Evil, be thou my good. By thee at least, divided empire with heaven's king I hold. By thee, and more than half perhaps will reign, as man ere long, and this new world shall know. On January 10th, 1776, Thomas Paine invoked Satan as the presiding spirit of the American Revolution with the publication of his pamphlet, Common Sense. I mean, this is the American history I did not learn in school. I can tell you that much. My teachers weren't like, so Paine invoked Satan as the presiding spirit of the American Revolution. So Jones's point of view here is interesting to me. The presiding spirit of the American Revolution with the publication of his pamphlet, Common Sense, which, quote, became an immediate sensation, unquote, after being, quote, sold and distributed widely and read aloud at taverns and meeting places. If we consider its distribution in proportion to the population of the colonies at that time, Common Sense had the largest sale and circulation of any book published in American history, unquote. 7 months after the publication of Common Sense, Satan's speech became the basis for America's Declaration of Independence. I wasn't taught that in school either, or no one taught me to look at it that way. Even though all of the signers of that declaration were in full rebellion against the Calvinism which inspired Milton, the signers of the Declaration of Independence expressed the gist of Satan's speech when they wrote, quote, when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security, unquote. Looking back from Satan's speech, here we may reign secure. It does have a very real echo of that speech from Paradise Lost. America was destined to become what the Ayatollah Khomeini referred to as the Great Satan. The moment Milton's co-religionists stepped onto the shores of Massachusetts Bay. Consequently, the sons of those Puritans were the best interpreters of that spirit as it morphed into Unitarianism and then apostasy over the course of the 19th century. Ralph Waldo Emerson most certainly read Paradise Lost. His most famous essay, Self-Reliance, resonates with the same satanic spirit and cadence. Having learned from Milton that the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell a hell of heaven, Emerson concluded that nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. When a generation raised on a different understanding of the... I just have to interject something. I remember reading Emerson, and maybe I was in my 20s, and I really liked it. But there was something about it that I just could not really fully embrace. I was like, there's some goodness here. There's something good, and I liked his spirit, but it was like I couldn't put my finger on it. But I was like, but it didn't resonate as like true with me, like in my heart. And I just don't know what it was. And maybe Jones is sort of like explaining now why. When a generation raised on a different understanding of the Bible demurred, saying, "But these impulses may be from below, not from above," unquote, Emerson countered by invoking Satan, quote, They do not seem to be such, but if I am the devil's child, I will live then from the devil," unquote. Emerson got the idea that he was the devil's child from the Calvinist principle of total depravity, which he rejected while retaining the satanic gist of the Protestant revolutionary spirit. Emerson's neighbor, Nathaniel Hawthorne, inherited the same Calvinist legacy, and like Emerson, he rejected it, but he could never accept Emerson's naive optimism and remained a prisoner of the dark forest, which he described in Young Goodman Brown after Brown left his wife, Faith, to meet up with the devil. Confronted with the devil's impatience, all young Goodman Brown could say is that Faith kept me back a while before being welcomed into the communion of your race, which is that evil is the nature of mankind. These are all quotes from the story. As young Goodman Brown noted when he saw Goody Cloyse, "That woman taught me my catechism." Faith kept the American Republic back a while, but the emergence of the American Empire after World War II has been one long plunge into Satanism. Like Satan, the dark figure who welcomed young Goodman Brown into the forest, the Puritan minister explains that evil must be your only happiness. America, if by that we mean the world's fourth great religion, has been a centuries-long pact with the devil. America is more than its hidden grammar. American identity is also based on the lived identities of people who came here looking for a better life. How these two vectors produced something new is the subject of this book. So that's the end of the introduction. Whew, some fiery stuff there. And I like that ending. He says that Satanism is the hidden grammar of American identity, or not American identity, but the American Revolution. But he says that there's something else, that we're more than that. And he says it's also based on the lived identities of people who came here looking for a better life. The lived identities. And how these two vectors produce something new is the subject of the book. So it's not just about all the Satanism stuff or whatever. So when I'm thinking about the lived identities, I'm thinking also about the class that's starting in January that I think would be a great follow-up to this class, the lived identities of American saints. Because if we can see what Jones is saying here about American identity, I don't know how much he's going to get into Catholicism here. The romantic rehabilitation of nature. Let me give you some insight into the chapters of the book. There's a lot. The Salem witch trial is a fascinating chapter. I read that last night. The Reformation as looting operation. Bacon's rebellion and the invention of whiteness. The false bottom of Puritan theology. Benjamin Franklin and the rationalist reaction. The Great Awakening leads to the American Revolution. Daniel Boone, Essence Means Existence. James Fenimore Cooper goes to Rome. Nathaniel Hawthorne goes to Rome. Henry David Thoreau and Moral Nature. The Beecher family, Nativism and Moral Collapse. Hawthorne in Rome. Samuel Clemens, Beecher's Innocent. Samuel Clemens, I believe that's Mark Twain. Henry Adams, The Old Man of the East. Rose Hawthorne Becomes a Nun? What? Theodore Roosevelt and Muscular Christianity. John Ireland and Americanism. The Green Brothers Create the American House. Jack London and the Urbanization of America. Ernest Hemingway, Modernity in the Woods. William Faulkner and the Bear. Walter Lippmann and the Repudiation of Jeffersonian Democracy. Ayn Rand and the Jewish Take on American Identity. Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry and the Race Issue. Critical Race Theory and the Destruction of American Identity. The Unforgiven, America Goes to Hell. A lot in here. I don't know how much he's going to get into the Catholic history of America. So it'd be really interesting, I think, to read this book with us in this class. And then maybe if you want to come back in January, if I can get the teacher of that class, Claudio Salvucci, to do a live class for adults on that book, then we could really kind of blend the two. I don't know. I think it could be really, really good. So if you are feeling patriotic right now, if you're feeling lost, like as an American, you don't have an identity, if you live overseas and you've always been really curious about America, because we forced all of our Kentucky Fried Chickens and McDonald's on you for all these years, I don't know. Join the class. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And I'm pretty hooked. I've tried to read Dr. Jones's books before, and I've never made it all the way through. Sometimes it's just a matter of I've had books before that I'll pick up year after year again and again and sit down and want to read it, and it just doesn't click. Something just doesn't work. I just don't feel like it. And then one day I'll pick it up and I'll start reading and I can't put it down. And so I don't know. I think there's something kind of mysterious about the books that come into your life and what grabs you at one minute and what grabs you at another. But for some reason, this one is really grabbing me. And I think it's because, I did live through 9/11. I did live through all that, like all of you. I saw that patriotism, and that unity in the aftermath, but it was so fake because it was all just unity against the enemy. The kind of unity that's born from, feeling threatened and feeling like we're all on the same side or whatever. And it really fell apart, didn't it? Didn't last long. And now I just don't even know what this country is doing. I don't know what's going on. I'm confused. So, I think it's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of good discussions. So I don't have more details for you. I guess I should get details. Look it up on my phone. Anyway, starts September 9th, I think. Hold on. I should have these details in front of me. It starts on September 9th. We're going to meet Tuesdays, 5 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock Eastern. And for 1 hour, Dr. Jones will give a 15 to 20 minute lecture, and then we'll have discussion, and you'll be able to ask all your questions. I've already got a lot of questions, so get in line behind me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to be the moderator, so I'll let you guys ask all your questions first. Anyway, I hope to see you there. Check out the links in the description, and I'll be back soon with another podcast, I hope. All right. Take care. God bless, and God bless America.